mari he hala pe kotali e va Pana e a pomino ano ngasi oloto ha Io he koe na nivi e filo siliva Uisi o kolei vahina E kakalata puta e ueia Lanu e malada si o fofo mapotu e langi tau kakapa Hei lala mo e huni o umutangata Uisi o kolei vahina He kakalata puta e ueia Lanu e malada si o fofo mapotu e langi tau kakapa Hei lala mo e huni o umutangata
Yo, it's your boy King Nato, Little Jum, Jay Swagger, Super Mikes, Nato Brothers, let's go. I didn't know we hurt so much without you by my side, but I don't know if you understand the pain I'm carrying inside, cause I miss you every day, every second of my life, and you should know my love for you was never a lie, and everything you told me is true, and you're right, but before you say something, don't wanna hear you say goodbye. Can you please do me a favor, cause I've been waiting for so long, and all I want for you is to listen to this song.
La belle taofi, e sa o e ua ole fa maoni. Ai ona ole lalo langi, ma ona tu ina na una si se ai lo nei ma fau fau. Taofi, la belle taofi, se io e ua ole fa maoni. Aole ne ua o sau, lolo to ua nau nau, le afoi o e mo wau. Ai o te fia o batu, fia a batu, lo ua lofa, ia te oe lo ua lofa, fa angalu ni fatia o sola, fa atau no o te mo o maponga, ia te umau be, le alofa. Vai, vai, le mu mai pe, le fai ngā ko tā o mea. Aua e te popo le fua, I tala e fe avea I mai, e le ai lava se me mawai. Ai kisi mai se I o ufa, ngalo ngalo atu, ai o le itinga. E tuku atu I le tema, vambe mai o se aso, ai fa apa ia ina. Pelo yo mantua, te le to firmana tua. Ai va ai oi, ele vale lotina, e fai ni tala fa apena. Isana tama, le ai funa wa ulava. Na se ai ole atu ile ama. I wanna lava moa u, beni popole fua itala efe avea imai ele lava se me mawai ai si mai se yo fa ngalo ngalo atu ai one itinga
Ever my pese.
no
My pese.
Back in the game,
yeah
So it's fair.
been gone for a minute, but I'm back.
Been too long since I first found my baby. Ooh. No text, no reply from you. I know it hits differently, baby. 2-3 days since I last seen you, baby. Ooh. Can't no wait to see you, baby. Cause you're my belly, yeah. Ooh. Belly, yeah. You're my belly, yeah. Ooh. Belly, yeah. No, 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 no. Let me tell you about this beautiful Taylor. The way she flow finna make me go crazy. I never thought that you would ever be my baby. I never thought this love could ever be this wavy. You are perfect, like a diamond, beautiful princess from the islands. No girl above you, so baby come through. So won't you stop ignoring me, baby? Oh yeah, been too long since I first found my baby. Ooh. No text, no reply from you. I know it hits differently, baby. 2-3 days since I last seen you, baby. Ooh. Can't no wait to see you, baby. Cause you're my belly, yeah. Ooh. Belly, yeah. You're my belly, yeah. Ooh. Belly, yeah. No, 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 no. Ooh. Belly, yeah. You're my belly.
Hello everyone. We'll start in a couple of minutes, so if you just want to grab your seats and get your beverages and refreshments. Yeah, in about 5 minutes we start. We're just waiting for 2 more guests who are just parking up. PIFS.
beau au mai rawa utumu ena no mai alitu leandi sarundende nando yali mai beau au mai rawa utumu ena no mai alitu nauna raba meka daruna beirai nauna raba meka daruna beirai sarundende nauna raba meka daruna beirai nauna raba meka daruna beirai sarundende oh malili tukoiau ai lulubu na yalongu isalei muna numia mai ena nungu tu bakaongo lebu tu mana baka isa senika utava mbeka amboiga isalei muna numia mai.
Five, testing. Can I ask everyone just to take their seats for mullet? E ngā mana, e ngā reo, e ngā hau e whā, e ngā waka, tihei mauri ora. Ko rangi nui kei runga, ko papatu nuku kei raro ko ngā tāngata wainga nui, tihei mauri ora. Ko te atua kei runga, ko te atua kei raro, ko te atua nei ngā mea katoa, tihei mauri ora. Nō reira nā mi atu ka koutou katoa toa i tēnei rā me tēnei pō. Kia ora nā koutou katoa toa i te iara. Malo e lelei, malo e taulawa. Nisa mbole vinaka, whakalowhalai atu ki mutolu osi. Malo ni, whakatalo whātu. No ia mauri, kamna mauri. Talo whalawa, a whio maia, su maia, tala maia au, mea mai, tomo mai, greetings to one and all. Before we do start today's proceedings, I'd like to welcome everyone to the public seminar around Pacific Transnational Leadership panel, and also like to welcome everyone into the Whale Pacifica. Whale Pacifica e tua i le marae o le te waipapa. O le nei fo I whanua, o umana tō pano a wā, a o onga, le ngata I tangata whenua, ai maise o e na wholau mai le moana nui a Kiwa. Tu watu le mātou lima, le mātou whaatalofa, whaafelo ai atu ai lo o tō paia mo lo o tō mamalu. Without further ado, we'll open up in just a little hymn and a prayer, and I'll lead us in the proceedings. But we also have a group from the Whale crew just to help us lead the song. If you know the song, feel free to sing along. A mata mea laulava fionga whai ufo I ati ois wha moe moe. Au le aunga ma le wha moe moe o le mātou te talo. Wha pēnā na ua li tia ma fio mai lo wanganga I ni a tai tōlo ina le nei wha moe moe. tala I whinangalo, te tala I fo I le whaasoa. Maua e whaalumanga whaalea o oina, ia au wā fo I le atina enga o whi au mga luenga, so se matata, ma so se potu a onga, so se universite, ma malaya o oina. Le li e wha mole mole o le talo o lau whanau, wha pe nao na au manu mea uma e lau fiso swani ma lau whaatasi mai. A mata I ati oe, wha i ui ati oe, maualunga pea lo vi inga lo mātou atua. Talo nā maleolenga, e ala atu I lau suafa pele Yesu wa mātou wole ma walau atuai. Amene, ma amene.
Kia ora koutou katoa, kia ora ana katoa toa, whakalowhalahi atu, Nisa Bulavanaka, Māloe lei, Taloha ni, ka Māori, Rānanam, Hello Geta, Mālo le soifo moa malalangi mā. On behalf of Te Poutoko Ora Kiwa, the Centre for Pacific and Global Health, and our Transnational Pacific Leadership Team, warm Pacific greetings to our distinguished guests, friends who were able to brave the Auckland weather and traffic, and along with those who connect with us over the digital moana. I'd also like to acknowledge our special guests, Secretary General of the Pacific Islands Forum, Mr. General Puna, Mr. Kosi Latu, former Director General of the Secretariat of the Pacific Regional Environment Program, Pro Vice Chancellor Pacific, Associate Professor Jemima Tiatia, Deputy Vice Chancellor of Research, Professor Simon Holloway, Acting Dean, Faculty of Medical and Health Sciences, Professor Warwick Bragg, and Dame Te Wela Percival, Kids First Children's Hospital in the University of Auckland. I'd also like to extend my welcome to those who are awake at this time of the hour, to our Development Leadership Program team based in London, Professor David Hudson, Professor Chris Roach, and Miss Isabel Wilson-Clary. Also, our Australian Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade friends, and from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Ministry of Business and Innovation. I'd also like to acknowledge Dr. Audrey Elmore from the Fred Hollows. Lovely to see you again. Awhio mai, me leo mai, tala mai au. Okay, so my name is Dr. Roini Nashu, and I'm delighted to welcome you all here to our very first seminar brought to you by Te Poutoko Ora Kiwa. The word Poutoko means leader, and Kiwa is the connection to Te Moana Nui a Kiwa, our Pacific Ocean. So it is only fitting that our very first public seminar focuses on Pacific regional leadership. We are very privileged and fortunate to share findings from the Transnational leadership in the Pacific Research Project. This research project is a part of the Developmental Leadership Program, which is an international research collaboration that investigates the crucial role that leaders, networks, and coalitions play in achieving development outcomes. It is funded by the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. This project was led by myself as well as Professor Jack Corbett, from Monash University. He wished he could be here, but he came down with an illness, so we send our aloofas out to you, Jack. Also part of the team was Salah, Dr. George Carter from the Australian National University, Dr. Eben Fehoko, who is now part of the University of Otago, and Mr. Sam Pilisi, who is an up-and-coming Nguyen scholar. This project investigates regional leadership across the Pacific, asking how transnational leaders in the Pacific understand their role and function. While there have been many biographies and accounts of Pacific political leaders, this project provides the first in-depth study of Pacific non-political leaders, who are our leading stars in the development of the Pacific as a region. I'd like to acknowledge those who spent time with us in sharing their stories. They were Taholo Kame, Leota Kosi Latu, Dr. Manu Matawai Tupo Rusin, Dame Meg Taylor, Wheloai ki Tau Kaho Tevi, Sir Collin Tukuitonga, Whekita Utui Kamanu, Andrew Valentine, and Dr. Donald Wilson. This project started off, as many great ideas do, a glass of wine among friends. So Jack Corbett and I were in New Caledonia. At the time I was at ANU, Jack was at University of Southampton, and Sir Collin was just finishing up at SPC. While we were there, we mused that while there are many biographies and accounts written about political figures in the Pacific region, there wasn't much written about our leaders who have led the Pacific region and served the Pacific region well at a global level. This project, therefore, explicitly takes a strength-based approach, and rather than highlighting the challenges or the deficits in terms of the lack of capacity and other critiques, we saw much more value in listening to those and learning from those who were success stories for our region. Those who have stepped into regional leadership roles to canvass their ideas and identify patterns that might emerge by comparing their individual experiences. Our panel later on this evening will allow us to talk to some of our regional leaders about their experiences. However, to begin proceedings this evening, who best to talk about Pacific regional leadership but our keynote speaker, Secretary General Henry Puna. Secretary General Henry Puna is the 10th Secretary General of the Pacific Islands Forum. He is the first Cook Islander to hold this post. The Pacific Islands Forum Secretariat General is responsible in close consultation with the Forum Chair and within the limits set by the Forum leaders from time to time for setting Forum leaders' meeting, agendas and coordinating responses by members to regional events, particularly crises. The Secretary General also performs other key functions such as the Pacific Ocean Commissioner. As the Pacific Ocean Commissioner, the Secretary General advocates for a secure future of Pacific people based on the sustainable development, management and conservation of the Pacific Ocean and its resources. Prior to taking up the regional role on May 24, 2021, Secretary General Puna was Prime Minister of the Cook Islands from November 2010 until 2020. Born in Aitutaki and raised in Rarotonga, he spent his formative years witnessing the transition to self-governance for his nation. He was one of the first wave of Cook Islands solicitors, starting here at Waipapa Taumatarau, then on to University of Tasmania, obtaining a Bachelor of Laws degree in 1979. He is also an alumnus of the Australian National University in Canberra. In 2016, in recognition of his service to the region and academia, he received an honorary doctorate in law from the University of the South Pacific, Fiji, and served as Chancellor of the University from 2017 to 2018. As a forum leader championing climate change, tuna fisheries, and innovative partnerships for oceans and energy sustainability, a landmark goal achievement has been made in 2017 with the founding legislation establishing the world's largest multiple-use marine park, the Marae Moana. Henry Puna is also an avid golfer and fisher. Please join me in welcoming Secretary Henry Puna to the stage.
I must hasten to add that while I'm an avid golfer, I'm just an average golfer. Professor Warwick Bagg, Dean of the Medical School, University of Auckland. Pro Vice Chancellor, Pacific, Jemima Tiatia. Sir Collin Tukuitonga, Associate Dean of the Pacific Faculty of Medical and Health Sciences Administration and Director of the Auckland Research Centre, Te Poutoko Ora, Kiwa. Distinguished panelists and guests, the academic faculty and students of Auckland University, ladies and gentlemen, kia ora and warm Pacific greetings to you all here this afternoon, and to those of you tuning in from across the Pacific region. At the outset, allow me to recognize the Auckland Research Centre, Te Poutoko Ora, Kiwa, for convening such a timely conversation for our region, particularly at this time. Me te kamata, Sir Collin, for honoring me with this invitation to share a few reflections on my own leadership journey. Indeed, it is in opportunities such as this that we take pause to see how far we have come, the lessons we have learned, and to look forward to what lies ahead. While mine may be a leadership journey that pales in comparison to those who have gone before me, I nevertheless hope that it has made a small but meaningful contribution to my country, to my region, and to my Pacific people. Ladies and gentlemen, to understand who I am today is to understand where I come from. I am the 7th of 12 siblings, born on the island of Aitutaki. Mine was the childhood of island simplicity, of subsistence living, but of rich cultural tutelage. Growing up, my formative years were shaped through the eyes, values, and experiences of my parents. My father taught me discipline and the simple value of hard work, of sharing what we have, no matter how little. My mother, on the other hand, was the epitome of compassion and care. I was lucky to be raised by my grandmother from an early age, and unbeknownst to me, the period of my life spent with her was to also be my first lessons in leadership and responsibility. To have been empowered to care for and look after my grandmother in her twilight years was one of my greatest blessings, as I was witness to the elderly wisdom of my family's metua on a daily basis from a young age. Together with the teachings of my parents, my early life was shaped around the value of hard work, the importance of respect, and the centrality of our culture and our relationships in our communities to our Pacific way of life. These values have evolved with time and experience, but remain at the core of who I am as an individual and as a leader. Leadership for me manifests in many forms and at all levels of our societies and our communities. Whether we consider leadership through the perspective of culture, politics, or professional careers, I have found that it is always centered on and around the privilege of serving others. If I were to reflect and identify an individual who was instrumental in my own political career, Sir Geoffrey Henry, the former Prime Minister of the Cook Islands, would instantly spring to my mind. He was renowned for recognizing youthful potential and was, more often than not, the encouraging force behind young and eager youth who demonstrated early the qualities and abilities to advance quickly. Indeed, Sir Geoffrey's foresight nurtured leaders of our future, and it continues to be a quality that we should emulate and uphold for the sake of our younger generations. To have had the opportunity to serve my country as Prime Minister has been one of the highest honors of my life. When I took on the role of Prime Minister on the 30th of November 2010, I took an oath to serve my country and her people, to look beyond our individual differences, and to recognize that we are one people with one vision and a common destiny. We built on the work of the leaders who came before us. Together, we propelled a stronger foundation for self-determination, a framework of governance which recognized that our future is mapped by our own talents and foresight, and that the measures of success as well as failure are our own. This sentiment was critical to the vision that we had for our country at that time, which was to move towards greater self-reliance. In saying so, I recognized earlier on in my career that the future of my country lay not on the land we stood, but in the ocean that we call home. With this vision in mind, we transformed the narrative of the Cook Islands during my tenure as Prime Minister, from one of a small island developing state to that of a large ocean state. This very idea and concept is captured in our Blue Pacific identity and the notion of the Blue Pacific continent, the very ideals that now form the basis of the 2050 strategy for the Blue Pacific continent. Similar to the notion of large ocean states, the Blue Pacific identity demonstrated a regional policy shift in our own ideology, from a collection of vulnerable island states to a cohesive and unified collective that together occupy an increasingly important strategic space in the world today. The prerequisite for this to be a true success is our solidarity and our unity as a Pacific Islands Forum. Because without a united forum, our strategic leverage is lost. Our current strategic context and the complexity of the challenges that we are faced with cannot be optimally addressed if we are not genuinely united and working towards a common vision. Indeed, our general approach to engagement has revolved around the principle friends to all and enemy to none approach. However, if you look around us at the evolving global order today, I am sure you will agree that we live and exist in an increasingly polarized world. A world which continues to be dominated by the geopolitical tussle between two global superpowers. We witness the introduction of foreign policy ideologies that seek to embed contrasting worldviews into our regional norms and standards. We see the strategic neglect of 10 years ago being replaced by the proliferation of regional strategies and consortiums that serve to shape and influence engagement with and in our region, tantamount to what I would say strategic manipulation. We see these points of external influence increasingly creep into all facets of our operations, both at the national and the regional level, reaffirming that common saying, there is no such thing as a free lunch. Our Blue Pacific continent is an increasingly contested space. Regional and national stability is critical to maintaining and protecting peace and security, prosperity, and the well-being of all Pacific peoples and of peace. If I am honest, we must realize that the strategic interest and attention we enjoy today will not last forever, and we must capitalize on it in a manner that will ensure sustainable gains for our region and for our people for decades to come. Our partnerships must be genuine and durable, and premised on understanding, friendship, mutual benefit, and a collective ambition to achieve sustainable results. Underlying this partnership approach must be the recognition and respect for our Pacific leadership and the responsibility they carry for every decision made in order to garner support for the sustainable development of their own nations. With those reflections in mind, allow me now to turn to my own personal reflections on my tenure as a regionalist and the time I have left. Indeed, as we move forward from the challenges within the Forum family of 2021-2022, I am determined that the sacrifice that my government and I have made to ensure the solidarity of the Forum will not be in vain. I hope that in the remainder of my short term as Secretary General, I will be able to consolidate the political conversations I've had in the last 3 years to articulate my interpretation of the risks and the opportunities that lie ahead for regionalism. In doing so, I hope that my successor will be better prepared to navigate and steer the region towards a stronger collective future. Having now served in this role, I have come to appreciate the importance of the role of Secretary General in upholding regionalism, not only as its custodian, but as the link and conduit between the political leaders that together form the Pacific Islands Forum, and in leading the collective's management of the often diverse views of our partners. As I have learned the hard way in the last 2 years, this role and position is not for the faint-hearted. It has pushed me to my limits both physically and mentally. It has required me to dig deep into my political experience to strategically assess emerging issues. It has tested my diplomatic skills to the wire, and it has forced me to be increasingly decisive and assertive. But through it all, I am proud that the values and teachings of my parents and our elders has always been my core guiding light. Indeed, I imagine that this is the case for all regionalists today, who manage the expectations of their memberships and yet continue to work to progress our collective aspirations. To lead a country is an honor. To lead a region of multiple independent and self-governing countries and territories is a masterful art. In closing, allow me to reflect with some words of tribute which many of the students who have come through these doors are familiar with. Ko te manu e kaiana te miro, nona te ngā here. Ko te manu e kaiana te matauranga, nona te ao. The bird who feeds on the berries has the forest, but the bird who feeds on knowledge has the world. Through a leadership lens and with the Pacific Islands Forum in mind, we know the importance of collective strength to the future of our Blue Pacific continent. When that collective strength seeks to better know and serve the needs of all who live in our Sea of Islands, our vast moana nui o Kiwa, we can truly lead the world. Me te kamata, thank you.
Me take ma'atas. I would now like to move us into the next session, which is, I guess, the fun part, which is our panel with our leaders. So first, I'd like to welcome up Sir Collin Tukuitonga. Sir Collin Tukuitonga is a Niuean-born New Zealand doctor, public health academic and public policy expert and advocate for reducing health inequalities of Māori and Pacifica people. He has held several positions in public health and government in New Zealand and internationally. He was appointed a Knight Companion of the New Zealand Order of Merit for services to Pacific and public health in 2022. Sir Collin has held several highly influential offices, including Director General of the Pacific Community, SPC, Commissioner and Coordinator for WHO Geneva, Chief Executive of the Ministry of Pacific Island Affairs, and Director of Public Health, Ministry of Health. He was also instrumental in establishing Pacific Language Weeks as an Aotearoa New Zealand government initiative, and his home is Niue, where he established the biannual Niue Culture and Arts Festival. Sir Collin is one of our most prominent Pacific figures in the health sector in Aotearoa and globally. His voice was crucial in advocating for Pacifica during the COVID-19 crisis in Aotearoa, and he has been consistently vocal in pointing to inequities for Pacifica in the health system and pushing for policy to impact Pacifica in better ways. His current positions at the University of Auckland are Associate Dean Pacific, Faculty of Medical and Health Sciences, Associate Professor Population Health, and Director Te Poutoko Ora Kiwa. Secretary, if you would like to join Sir Collin, while I invite our next panellist up. Leota Kosi Latu is the former Director General of the Secretariat of the Pacific Regional Environment Program from 2016 to 2022. SPREP is the premier intergovernmental agency for the Pacific environment, which was established by treaty in 1993 to support Pacific Island countries and territories with environmental management, sustainable development, and protection of the environment. Prior to being appointed Director General of SPREP in 2016, Mr. Latu was a SPREP Deputy Director General from 2008 to 2015. From 1995 to 2006, Mr. Latu held several senior leadership positions with the Commonwealth Secretariat in London, UK, initially as Special Legal Advisor and Head of the Legal and Economic Unit, and before that as Deputy Director for the Legal and Constitutional Affairs. Prior to SPREP, Mr. Latu was the Manager of the United Nations Office for Project Services Financial Compliance Program as the Pacific Islands Forum Secretariat from 2006 to 2008. He started his career as a state prosecutor with the Attorney General's Office for the Government of Samoa from 1990 to 1995. Mr. Latu is a law graduate of Canterbury University of New Zealand and also attained to the degree of Master of Laws from the International Maritime Organization, International Maritime Law Institute in Malta, and his expertise in international environment law, law of the sea, and financial compliance. Since completing his term as Director General of SPREP, Mr. Latu has taken up several positions as the Director at the National Provident Fund and the Muli Whenua Beach Resort Samoa Limited in Samoa. That's a nice place, Leota. Last but not least, I would like to invite Ms. Cynthia Houniuhi. Cynthia is a founding member and current president of the youth-led NGO Pacific Islands Students Fighting Climate Change. Her organisation has established 4 chapters in Fiji, Solomon Islands, Vanuatu and Tonga. Our organisation's core campaign started in 2019 in the classroom at USP. There, they sought to seek an advisory opinion from the principal judicial organisation of the UN, the International Court of Justice, on the question of what are states' obligations to protect the climate system and the rights of present and future generations from climate-induced harms, as well as the legal consequences for states that have caused significant climate harm to the planet and its most vulnerable communities. On 29th of March 2023, a milestone for the campaign was achieved when the advisory opinion resolution was passed through a historic vote by consensus at the United Nations General Assembly. Additionally, the campaign is set to activate youth activism in the Pacific and build the resilience of youth in the Pacific concerning climate change and its adverse effects. She's currently studying her Master of Laws, specialising in environmental law and sustainable development at the University of New South Wales, Sydney, Australia. As you can see, these guys are the real deal, hence the bios. So without further ado, I'm going to start with a couple of questions for the panelists. And while they're speaking, perhaps those online and here in the room with us today can think of some questions. I've been informed that no question is off limit. They're happy to answer the hard-hitting questions while you have them in the room. Okay, first of all, there have been some great successes in Pacific regionalism, as well as some disappointments. Can each of you discuss some of the highlights and the lowlights of Pacific regionalism that you've seen as a Pacific regional leader? You can start.
Well, thank you, Rowanne, and good evening, everyone, including those online. Let me firstly acknowledge Secretary General Puna for that wonderful opening remarks, and of course my fellow panelists. There's a tendency to focus on the negative, particularly in the media, but if you look at the developments in the Pacific, there's a whole lot, and we could spend the whole evening talking about them. I want to highlight a few. The Treaty of Rarotonga, 85 I think it was the first real landmark collective decision that banned nuclear testing, etc. I think that was an important development in and of itself, but it also was a major influence on the regional global discussions on testing and of nuclear weapons and related issues. You'll forgive me if I take an abbreviated version to these things. The University of the South Pacific is a significant development. Many in the small island states would not have been able to afford a tertiary education, particularly women, no question. It's had its challenges in the last little while, but I still believe the USB, I'm a bit biased because I was one of the graduates of the university. I think provided a really good united approach to tertiary education, and I would hope that despite its challenges that it would regain its strength and continue to offer tertiary education. You know, the likes of Samoa and Solomons and Fiji could afford their own national universities. But if you think about the smaller states in the region, it's problematic. And I think an institution like the University of the South Pacific is an important and critical part of our learning environment in the region. There's a whole lot of other developments based on cooperation. The organization I used to work for, SPC, was formed in '47. They've done some tremendous work in the region. There was, for a time, the Pacific Forum line was an attempt to address the expensive, unreliable shipping services around the region. There's lots that we could talk about, but I just offer those as a few examples of, and there's many more. I'm sure my panelists would add to those as well.
We had an agreement before we came in that since I'll be speaking for 15 minutes, I'd give all the opportunity to my fellow panelists to answer the questions. Thank you, Kosi.
Thank you, SG. This is what we call in rugby a hospital pass. I said to SG that in his speech basically provided all the answers to the questions. But let me first of all say thank you to the organizers for bringing us here today, and appreciate the effort that has gone into this. But let me begin by saying that there are, of course, many successes when it comes to regionalism, and Sir Collin has mentioned some of them. But as someone that's been involved in climate change negotiations for several years, I would probably say that the Paris Agreement in 2015 was probably a hallmark for us as a region. Sir Collin was there, Secretary General was there, and perhaps some of you who are sitting here today as well were also present. And the reason being is this: for many, many years, many of our leaders were advocating for a just agreement that would look beyond just beyond the interests of the big countries, but an agreement that would address as much as possible our concerns. And for many years, our leaders not only raised the profile of the Pacific, but at every given opportunity, they would tell a story. And that was basically telling the story. And the story was that if we don't do anything now to limit emissions, many of these small island states, countries would disappear. And that was the story that we advocated in many of the previous COPs prior to the Paris Agreement in 2015. One of the hallmarks of that COP was the fact that many of our leaders weren't just making speeches, but they were actually involved in the actual negotiations up to like 3 in the morning. That doesn't always happen, but on this occasion, I remember several of our leaders were still negotiating up to 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. I think SG, you were one of them. PM Sopoanga from Tuvalu was one of them. Anate Tong from Kiribati, the former president, former Minister for Foreign Affairs for the Marshalls, Tony de Broom, the late Tony de Broom was one of them. And so it was such a relief, I think, for us when there was agreement on the 1.5 degrees Celsius as, you know, as sort of the threshold. And that was something that we were fighting for. And so for us, that was just the beginning. It wasn't, how do you say, the answer to all of our problems, but for us, that was just the beginning. I guess one or two more, I guess, successes that are related to that was the fact that we were also advocating for oceans to be included in the climate change negotiations, because for a very long time, oceans was just merely mentioned as just a byword, but there was no substantive, discussions on this issue. And for us, from the Pacific, it was important to advocate strongly to include oceans, because if you look at the map, as a region, we're 98% ocean and only 2% land if you exclude Australia and New Zealand. And so the ocean was so important for us. And eventually we got that in. And then we also were fighting very hard to include what's called loss and damage, L&D. And that was very, very difficult, because that was something that many of the developed countries were not prepared to accept. They were not prepared to entertain the whole idea of compensation for the impacts, adverse impacts of climate change. And of course, last year at COP27 in Egypt, we had an excellent outcome of the COP, where we now have a fund to compensate loss and damage. Why loss and damage? We were the ones, it was our leaders who actually advocated for loss and damage. And it took a long, long time, but eventually, once again, we triumphed. Now again, I like to caution that, that having that outcome, positive outcome, doesn't mean that all of our challenges have been resolved. No, we still have plenty. But one by one, we have seen our region not only make sure that our voice is heard, but we have made gains in areas that no one ever thought. No one ever thought that loss and damage would ever be accepted, let alone have a fund that will compensate for loss and damage. So I think I'll stop there. Thank you.
Firstly, before I explore the question, I just want to say thank you again for giving me this space. It's amazing how a conversation at Dr. Rooney's house one dinner can end you up in a panelist where everyone has achieved so much, and I do feel overwhelmed to be sitting here amongst Pacific leaders, and so I'm not going to lie about that. For me, I will try to answer this question from the perspective of a young Pacific Islander. When I think of regionalism and what the highlights of it are, I think of our story, our campaign. You know, it's because of regionalism that has enabled it to achieve what it has achieved. For example, you look at institutions like USB, that is where it started. A group of students from around the Pacific. It started with 27 law students, but mostly they were from 8 different Pacific Island countries that came together and saw leaders negotiating on the international level, so our communities fighting on the community level. So we wanted to see how we can also, in our capacity as law students, add to that collective vision that we have. And so it started from that regional body, and then the destination we wanted was the PIFS, the Pacific Islands Forum Leaders Meeting. And so it's these 2 institutions, that particular institutions really springboard this idea to the international level. So it was because of these 2 institutions that were very vital in our campaign. And it shows how collectively the Pacific have come behind this initiative, especially to address climate change. And also, it shows also a success story of how Pacific Island countries work with civil societies, by governments on the government level, and as well as in terms of the regional level. So this is like a model of that, how regionalism can enable such initiatives to take place. Most Pacific leaders and civil societies, oftentimes they are not at odds, so that it has enabled civil societies like ours to really carry on our campaign. So when I think of highlights, I often think of those 2 institutions in terms of enabling our campaign to go as far as it did with their leadership, because we could not have achieved that by ourselves. It was a very ambitious campaign, but it was possible because of that collective working together. So apart from that, this is just the Pacific coming behind, protecting not only the rights of my generation now, but our future generations as well. So that's what I think of when I think of a highlight. So I'd like to share that. Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia. I think one of the reasons why I invited you, not just because you're a good dinner mate, but it's the It's the idea that our young Pacific students in a classroom at university can make a change at a global level. So you 100% deserve to be in that seat. All right, so in terms of delivering regionalism, what do you think are the most pressing leadership needs? And how do you think we could address these needs?
Is this another hospital pass?
Absolutely.
Well, Secretary General has outlined the challenges of giving effect to regionalism. I mean, I'm a healthy skeptic about most things. There's no doubt that regionalism potentially could offer a lot of benefits, but it's really the implementation of that becomes challenging. So loss of sovereignty always keeps cropping up, particularly the smaller island states, a bit concerned that Fiji and Papua New Guinea might take over. So those sort of practical issues that would cause people concern. But I think the potential benefits of working together clearly outweigh those issues. And perhaps SG clarity over the no-go areas might reassure some people. For example, protecting sovereignty so that people can make their own choices, whether to join something or not join something. In other words, to be clear about those. Because I think we've kind of stalled in a way because of those potential concerns that people have. When I was at SPC, our brief was purely technical, so there was never any real issues of a political nature that hold people back, because cooperation was respectful, was open, and people can choose to participate in a project or not. Those kinds of non-threatening and respectful relationships, such as those that you speak about, we might help to reassure those that might be concerned about, being overwhelmed by the bigger groups. There are clearly broader concerns that come in from outside the region that often cause people concern. And so perhaps, as I say, maybe some clarity over this is Niue, and Niue will not do ABC or similar kinds of approach. But, regionalism is always give or take. You give some, you take some, and it's a negotiated process. But I'd like to think that overall the region has, the benefits of working together has clearly outweighed any of those kinds of concerns.
Yeah, thank you, Sir Collin. For me, politics and diplomacy are very difficult areas to navigate, particularly when you have a collective of 18 sovereign countries. And as politicians, I know that, their priority is the best interest of their own countries. And that comes first. But regionalism is very important, particularly for us small island states, because we realize and acknowledge that in the world we are nothing. And yet by coming together, we can have some bargaining power. And Kosi mentioned the most beautiful example of regionalism, in Paris in 2015, when the whole world, agreed to sign the Paris Accord. I remember sitting in the plenary hall behind President Obama and President Putin. It was lovely to see the world in one room. And we all had photos taken. There was nothing, no problems. But, I think where our interests align at the national and the regional level, there is no problem with regionalism. We all acknowledge that we've got to stick together as a region if we are to make any difference. And that 2015 climate change conference in Paris, that's a perfect example. By the way, there are also recent examples, not as well known. You might have heard that recently the United Nations General Assembly agreed to pass the BBNJ Treaty. You know, this is a treaty to protect the biodiversity beyond national jurisdictions. Not well known, but for us in the Pacific, as Kosi had mentioned, made very clear, the ocean is absolutely critical for us. And so that is important. And then just late last year, our ministers managed to persuade the world, WTO in Geneva, to agree to the removal of harmful subsidies on fisheries. Because we've always been complaining that, you know, the subsidies paid by respective governments to their fishing people are very harmful for our fisheries resources, not just in the Pacific, but throughout the world. And so that's an achievement worth celebrating, and only made possible because we came together as a region. But regionalism is very important. As Sir Collin has made clear, there are huge benefits for us, and particularly for small island states. And that's why we've taken the approach I mentioned in my speech, you know, friends to all and enemy to none. That has to be the most practical approach that we can take in our foreign policy. So huge benefits. But I think, you know, where our national interest and the regional interest don't align, it is very important for our leaders, you know, to engage in talanoa, the Pacific way of sitting down and talking through issues. I am a firm believer in talanoa, in talking through any issues. Nothing is unsolvable, but if you have enough patience and respect in your discussions, you will come to a common agreement on any issue.
Thank you, SG. Perhaps maybe talanoa might be a good point for me to perhaps maybe highlight a challenge, but also an approach, a traditional approach that has worked for us in the past. In January of this year, the new Prime Minister of Fiji, Sitiveni Rabuka, made a trip to Kiribati. And the aim of that trip was to try, maybe SG should talk about this, was to try and bring Kiribati back into the fold. But what was interesting was the fact that the Prime Minister of Fiji undertook it was a traditional apology. And seeing them sitting down on the mat and having a talanoa was, you know, reminiscent of how we used to do it in the past. When we had a problem or a challenge, we'd sit down on the mat and have a chat, you know, over a kava bowl, and then the problem was solved. And that was, for me, that was amazing. I mean, it was simple. You know, it was a talanoa, it was an apology, but it was also a good way of addressing a problem that was a challenge for all of us in the region. So, you know, it goes to show that that the old ways, you know, can help address some of these issues. Let me just also highlight something that I think is probably an important area where the Pacific has been, how do you say, we're seeing more and more external actors, particularly if you look at the two powers that are in rivalry in the Pacific in terms of geopolitics. Everybody knows about this, you know, it's on the news, so it's not a secret. But it occurred to me that in reaching some of these geopolitical decisions that these big powers did not consult some of our leaders. And so you, for example, had the Indo-Pacific strategy, which was developed by one of these powers, which provided references, of course, to the Pacific in terms of prosperity, resilience, climate change, and all of that. But there was no input from our leaders. It was sidelined. Thankfully, there was a partnership that particular power entered into with the Pacific region and sought to address that limitation. So I was glad that there was an ability to try and adopt a different way to working with the Pacific. We've got to realize this. This is the reality. We are a small region that is highly vulnerable, not just to climate change and natural disasters, but also to the geopolitical rubble that's happening in the region. We are, because we are highly dependent in so many ways. But we don't have to be dictated to. I believe that we should be making the most of the geopolitical rivalry and see where we can benefit from it. It does not have to be one against the other. It should be a question of how does the Pacific benefit from this? And so, I think that that's a challenge for us, where the big powers to be make decisions which affect us, but we're not consulted. But I was pleased that there was this partnership where the Pacific leaders were consulted. I might as well say who it is. It's the US, is no secret. And I think SG probably knows more about this than me, but I was pleased to see that that partnership sought to address the concerns of many of us who saw a strategy that was being developed by that country that included the Pacific, but there was no input from the Pacific. But then that partnership last year sought to address that. So that was good. I think that's the way to move forward. And we should be able to define our own destiny, our own vision, and the way we move forward. And I think that was a good example of how to move forward. Thanks.
Just to add on, I think I would like to reiterate what SG has sort of said. With this, my experience in these institutions, the one I've highlighted, I find that in unity, these institutions work when we unite. And so similarly with our group, it stems from the students were based in the Pacific. We learned about each other's culture. We understood each other better in that the struggles we face as students from different Pacific Island countries. That helped us to understand and create a better working relationship with this campaign. So it set the tone in that respect. Additionally, in terms of regionalism, we often hear it works for us. And we often hear young people are the leaders of tomorrow, but we don't see, or what we need more of is to have regional leadership architecture that is strong in that it includes bodies, that includes our youths in the spaces that we make decisions. For example, you have the UN, in terms of climate change, you have youth advisory bodies, so not more of ad hoc, but more building these youths for stronger Pacific regionalism tomorrow, in that sense. And as well as we're moving beyond tokenism as well, and also if we have this in place to strengthen them, if we lack it, to implement more, and to have more youths build the capacity. We, in this campaign, we find we do often lack the capacity. So those are some of the needs for regional youths to take part in these bodies. So those are the things that I wanted to just bring out. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Panelists, I would now like to invite questions from the floor. If you could just state your name and then ask your question either to all of them or one person. Anybody? I can see some.
Yep, Malozo for Manguia. My name is Lama. I'm a lecturer across the road here at the School of Architecture. I've noticed that the university is starting to direct some of its path, especially our school, towards the Pacific. Now that's probably, I think the question I'm trying to get at, what would you suggest or what would you recommend in terms of trying to educate our next generations of young architects about how to design in the Pacific. Whaftai?
I'm not sure that I can talk about how to get young architects, but let me talk broadly. I think the university's strategic plan is a good development and enables all of us to be creative, to take the opportunities. Te Poutoko is in formation. Some of you might be wondering, what on earth is Poutoko involved in a seminar on leadership in the region? But these things are interrelated. And the university's intention for us to be more Pacific, not just in Aotearoa, New Zealand, but to do more with and people around the region. And so for us at the center, we've developed a number of projects on mental health in Polynesian nations, impact of heat on health, a whole bunch of stuff. And in that process, encourage, invest, support young people to think about research as a career, or being a teacher, as you point out, in whatever field. In our case, of course, it's health, but health broadly defined. So my own view is, I was on, this is how old I am. 20 years ago, I was on faculty. And it was like trying to change things at that time was like, you know, I could use some colorful descriptions, but I won't. We did manage to do a few things, but going full circle, I'm really appreciative of the fact that the university is genuinely, I think, interested in reaching out to the region, and it's a two-way street. You know, to me, the signals from the strategic plan is there. So the team would just get on with it. Talk to people about projects, ideas, opportunities, and just make the most of it. But above all, you know, be careful that we're not the saviors from Aotearoa, but to work respectfully to support the team. We could talk to you, the team could talk to you about the approach we've taken to the mental health study, for example. It's really responding to and supporting George in Samoa and his team about what gets done over there. The data belongs to them, all of that kind of stuff. In other words, to think very carefully about those relationships. I'm not answering your question directly because I don't know anything about architecture, but I imagine it's very similar to public health or education. It's kind of what we do with it, but I really do think the university plan and current approach is an enabling one that we could all use, I think.
Yeah, Talofa, thank you for the question. It's good to see that the university is reaching out now to the Pacific in terms of its teachings. But I think what is really important is that if you want to reach out to the Pacific, that the teachings and the learnings are contextualized. By this I mean that, you know, the architectural requirements for New Zealand are different from those in the islands. I mean, can you imagine a typical Samoan whale, you know, open in Makagil or Dunedin? Far from it. So, and of course in Rarotonga there is this restriction on the height of buildings. You can't go higher than the coconut trees. So there are differences that I think, you know, the school must take into consideration when reaching out to the Pacific. And we know that the primary requirement for, you know, building houses in the Pacific is resilience to cyclones and extreme weather events. Although, of course, you know, New Zealand might be starting on that trend soon, you know, with your unfortunate experiences with Cyclone Gabriel recently. So, you know, I think those points are very important, to have the teachings and the learnings contextualized properly so that you can reach out to the Pacific in an informed manner. Thank you.
not sure I can add much more to that. I think the two wisest on the panel have provided some guidance on that. But one of the things that a couple of years ago we were discussing was how do we provide cheap but resilient building for our Pacific communities in the light of natural disasters and things like that. And I remember a couple of years ago when I think it was Cyclone Winston that hit Fiji and Tahiti had offered to provide some very simple designed housing, which was cheap, but were built according to standards that would, according to the engineers and architects, would be resilient in terms of cyclones. So there's already some work that's been done in the Pacific. There's companies that are already looking at coming up with concepts that look at cheap but also resilient type designs. I can't tell you, give more details other than to say that that's something it's been discussed, it's current, but perhaps maybe you need to go out there and offer some guidance and do a bit of outreach to the people there. But the key thing is the cost, obviously, and something that can be replicated, and not just in one community, but in as many communities as possible.
So I'm going to ask a general one that covers some of these themes that are coming through, and then we can go to Sai after that. So quite a few questions have come up to ask, how can we accelerate the representation and inclusion of women, youth, and rainbow communities in leadership positions across the region? Cynthia? How do we get more of you? Pretty much is what they're asking.
Yeah, like I've sort of touched on previously, it is often that, I'm speaking for youths generally, it is often that youths are seen as naive, or we don't know what we really want, we're still young, you know. And I think there's a gap for, we do know what we want, and we can do, like our story is a success story in terms of what youths are capable of achieving with working together. So I think creating, like I mentioned, more spaces where we can have more meaningful dialogue, and also for the leaders, you know, with your experiences, we would love to learn from you. We would love to learn from your experience. So having a platform where that is possible, and especially with the institutions that are already in place, especially like, for example, the Pacific Island Forum, if we have sort of a body for youths to also be included in decision making, because the struggles that we have now will still be here for us when you leave us. So prepare us for what, you know, is about to come. So having that sort of spaces for us would be really important. And one way to go about it that I could think of now. But I don't speak for all the others as well. But this is one way we can sort of accelerate and have that happen for us. Yeah, thank you.
It's a hard one, isn't it? I mean, the individual island nations have laws and practices and policies and cultural norms that would shape how these things are done. I think it's important that New Zealand doesn't impose its Western values on how Pacific Island countries approach those issues. We would all have our own individual preferences about participation and leadership from the rainbow community. They will no doubt do the best they can, but I think it's important to point out that it's not really for us in New Zealand to dictate to the islands. And you might say, well, that's a cop-out, Collin. I'm just being pragmatic and real. It's not for me to tell Samoa or even Niue what to do. I can share my views and encourage the local leadership to be more inclusive, to be more diverse, to do all of those good things that we want to see. But I think we've also got to be careful about imposing our will and demands on the people in the region. That's my honest opinion. It's a challenge, no question. But only the people in the region can solve that issue, not those of us who live in New Zealand, I don't think.
Okay, thank you. I'll head to Sai. Sai had a question.
Mbulvanaka, everyone. Sai Mbolantundwa from Fiji, but from the School of Medicine. Grateful to be here and to hear from our esteemed leaders, your wisdom. Question about regionalism. How can we use the advantages or leverage on advantages of regionalism to improve health care access, improve health service and health delivery in our Pacific Island countries?
So let me try that first. There are, health clearly is done at several levels and a lot of it nationally. But there are some issues that I think require regional combined approaches. Small island states can't tackle the tobacco industry. It's pretty obvious. But if they work together, the tobacco industry interference continues to be a major issue in the islands. They've done a pretty good job, as far as they can, at the local level. But the tobacco industry, as you know, is a big monster. And on their own, they can't really have the impact that we might expect. And that is a good reason why a regional approach, people working together, is far more likely to be effective than small island states working on their own. The tobacco industry will just pick them off one by one. Advertising food to children is another example. On their own, small island states can't really manage that. That's a collective responsibility, including Australia and New Zealand, and because a lot of the images and advertisements and so on are created from outside the region. In other words, workforce, training of low volume specialists. So there's a number of things that clearly lend themselves to a collective approach. And I've made mention of some of those.
Thank you. Any more questions from the floor? Oh, okay, here we go. While the mic is making its way here, a couple of questions come online have been around partnership. Partnership has been bandied around by various aid partners. What are your thoughts about what meaningful partnership looks like?
The expert.
Yeah, you know, this is one of the challenges that we face at the forum. It used to be that, you know, our partners from outside would actually tell us what we need and what is good for us. Well, I'm pleased to say that is no longer the case. Under the principles of engagement that our leaders adopted in 2019, if a partner wants to engage with some of us, they must engage with all of us. But then, you know, it is up to us jointly to discuss what outputs, what outcomes we are seeking from them. And so, you know, those are the durable, genuine partnerships that I was referring to in my statement. And those are the people that matter to us. You know, gone are the days when people will come in and say, I know this is good for you, so take it or leave it. Well, not anymore. You know, we can't afford that sort of partnership anymore. So that is the short answer.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think for me, I would say, does it add value? Who benefits from this? I think it's important that we ask that question. Yeah, so, sorry, did you hear that? So the first question I would ask is, does this partnership add value? If it does, what value does it add? Does it benefit the beneficiaries? If it doesn't, then you stop there, you don't go any further.
I must add, Sir Collin mentioned, of course he mentioned America. They have entered into a genuine partnership with us. And I was really pleased last September when President Biden and his administration reached out to all of our members. Originally, they only reached out to about 12 or 14 of us and excluded the Cook Islands, Niue, the 2 French territories, French Polynesia and New Caledonia, and along with New Zealand and Australia. And so we met with Wendy Sherman, one of their senior officials in Honolulu, 2 weeks before the summit, and we urged her to convince President Biden that that's not how we want our engagement, to shape up. And thankfully, President Biden saw the wisdom of that. So, it was lovely. For me, that's an expression of genuine partnerships. And because of what they did, Korea also changed course. Originally, up until last year, they would only meet with foreign ministers from 12 countries, members of the forum. But I had a visit to Busan with our foreign ministers last October and convinced them that because America has reached out to all of our members and changed their system of engagement, that they must also follow suit. Thankfully, they didn't. So last May 29th this year, we had our first ever summit, our leaders and the government of South Korea. So things are slowly changing for the better. I've had a chat with my Chinese friends. I'm trying to convince them that this is the way to go. If they want to be a truly world leader in leadership, they have to overcome their minor differences with countries who do not recognize them and reach out. And hopefully in the next 10 months, before I finish off, we might have some progress in that area.
All right, questions on this side?
Yeah. Good evening. Thank you very much for your sharing your stories with the project. George Carter, trying and struggling in the winter in Canberra. Thank you very much for, again, for tonight. My question is around something that I've been fascinated every time we come to Auckland, which is Pacifica community. What are your thoughts in terms of the contributions, but also the challenges in terms of Pacifica, the Pacific community here, in terms of their contributions to Pacific regionalism? I guess for Cynthia, how has the diaspora contributed or also challenged the campaign throughout the years? I guess for our regionalists, beyond just that, is what would be their role in the future in terms of a space in any type of table where it allows that decision making in terms of the Pacifica community here towards the 2050, but also in 50 years. We see and marvel at the growth of Pacifica and Māori in this society. In 10 years, it'll be half of the population. This is a big mass, critical mass of our people. What is their role in Pacific regionalism in the future? After.
Okay, maybe I'll start off. A very good example has been a case of natural disasters. If you notice in the last couple of years where we've had cyclones, our communities here have come together and contributed back to whichever country that's been affected by a cyclone. And this is done, obviously, in a way to help people back home. One of the things that I think some governments, not all governments, but some governments have kind of struggled in terms of having to deal with that. How do you distribute, how do you ensure that that support from the diaspora gets delivered? But that's something that I think is just one area, one issue I can think of. This is my area of expertise, climate change, so I'm citing an example. And I'm pretty sure the next cyclone that's going to happen, we are going to see the diaspora from New Zealand, Australia, and wherever they are, come together again and put the resources and then send them back to the islands. That's something that's guaranteed, and that maybe that's something that perhaps maybe the region needs to look at. How can we harness that kind of support and those resources in a way that truly helps our people? Because what normally happens is that you have tons and tons of containers and people here just throwing stuff into it. Perhaps maybe we should be saying, okay, we acknowledge your support, but can you focus maybe in this particular area and so forth and so forth. So maybe there's a need to kind of perhaps provide some guidance in terms of it, because we know they are going to support us, but perhaps provide some guidance in terms of how to add value to that support.
If Pacifica wasn't actively engaged, you won't have a rugby team, and we won't have a rugby team worthy of anything. But seriously, in Aotearoa, the emergence of the Pacifica voice is without a doubt. We have, for the first time in a long time, a number of MPs in Parliament engaged at that level in terms of decision-making. Increasingly, Pacific people are in leadership positions around the country. So in my mind, there's no doubt about the influence of Pacifica people in Aotearoa domestically, but also in terms of foreign policy. One of the things I was really pleased about during COVID-19 was the active and palpable interest and presence of our government in supporting the island nations' provision of vaccines, deploying expertise to help, which I think is where it's going. In the old days, we used to try to shut out anything from the Pacific. They might bring those nasty bugs into Aotearoa. But you know, the more enlightened and progressive view is to say that we're all in this together, and that the more inclusive, the more engaging approach that we take to folk in the islands, the more benefits there will be. You know, I'm a public health person. You can't contain bugs. You can't contain advertising of salty food, for example. And so we've got to take a more broader approach to these things. But I do think there is a political environment that is progressive, that is looking more outwards than inwards. Clearly, the Pacific Islands region will always be somewhat different from New Zealand's other foreign policy interests, but there's no doubt in my mind that the Pacific is a place of importance and will continue to be so. That's just my own view.
Thank you, Dr. George, for that question. A lot of our campaign, our organization is very young, and we're figuring out a lot as we go, as students and as well as young people. But we've always intended this campaign to be a reflection of everyone that are from the Pacific. So it is challenging in the sense that it started from the institution USB, and so all of our members and all of our focus are from the member students from the member countries. That is one of the reasons why I'm happy to be here today as well. I would like to be able to, as the president of the organization, connect in an institution such as University of Auckland and see how the diaspora here, the students here, can come on the campaign with us, how we can work together. So that is also part of this opportunity for me, is to see and be more informed in how we can progress as well. So it was challenging not to have those diaspora represented in the members of our organization, but it has always been an intention to have everyone be represented in this regional youth organization. So yeah, thank you, John.
All right, thank you, Cynthia. That's all the time we have for questions. So I'd like to thank the panelists for their time. What I took away was Collin is always pragmatic, straight to the point. SG, I loved your comments about patience and respect. I'm sure Lemoa and the others were very happy with Kosi's comment around getting around the kava bowl. And for Cynthia, for you, you are our leading light, I guess. You're the next leader for us. So, whakataitele lava, the team has some gifts for you. All right, you can make your way back to your seats now. Whakataitele lava. To wrap up our proceedings this evening, I'd now like to welcome up Ms. Solstice Solly Middleby, who in addition to her PhD candidacy at the University of Adelaide, is an author, partnership broker and former Australian diplomat to the Pacific, so an Australian friend. She has lived and worked across the Pacific region for the last 20 years, making homes in Goroka and Suva and establishing a wide base of Pacific connections. Solly has supported Pacific-led development through partnership approaches, innovation and multi-stakeholder collaborations, working with AusAid, DFAT, IUCN, and most recently is the CEO of the Australia Pacific Training Coalition, APTC, where she led the program towards a Pacific-led approach from 2018 to 2021. Solly is also the director of Coconuts and Kurjongs, an online store showcasing Pacific products, and has been involved with various community projects, including the first TEDx event to be held in the Pacific Island country in Tokani, Friends of the Fiji Museum. Solly's doctoral research is focused on Pacific regionalism, specifically how power is understood and exercised within the practice of regional agreement making within the Pacific Islands Forum. Welcome.
Well, warm Pacific greetings to everybody, although I'm not sure it's so warm now. If my voice shakes, I'm sorry, I'm actually freezing. It's a very great honour to have been asked to make some remarks and to launch this new report, Seeing Like a Regionalist, which has underpinned our discussions today. As Roani said, Solly is my name and I have been a friend and collaborator and contributor to Pacific regionalism for 20 years. 20 years in which I've come to know many of you here today and perhaps some online, so it is a real pleasure to be here with you in this beautiful whale. We have heard an incredibly rich set of reflections, I'm sure you will all agree. Secretary General of the Pacific Islands Forum, someone who holds probably the most unique position in that he has sat on both sides of the regional table as the leader of his own country and now as the leader of the regional organisation itself. And I think we heard a little bit of reflecting on the different challenges those two roles bring, and I hope very much we'll get to read your memoirs one day. Also hearing obviously from Kosi and Sir Collin, two former heads of very important regional organisations, former heads who led their own organisations, but also I know worked very closely together and with the other crop heads to try and coordinate and collaborate across regionalism. And we look forward to your memoirs as well. This is what all the Pacific students in Canberra at ANU ask people, please write your memoirs so that we can reference you and what you thought. And of course, Cynthia, who represents obviously not just the next generation of Pacific leaders, but she also represents a really important part of Pacific regionalism and that of civil society, who have always played a long and active role. In this report, if you haven't read it when you get to read it, it does talk of the hope and despair in Pacific regionalism, and I think in times of despair, you only need to look at the work that Cynthia and the team that she worked with and the way their governments then worked to feel a great sense of hope. So just to talk a little bit about the report itself, it's called Seeing Like a Regionalist, The Dilemmas of Intergovernmental Cooperation in the Blue Pacific. As Roani said, the report is the product of a collaboration by a bunch of very impressive Pacific researchers, led of course by Roani, but also Sala Dr. George Carter, Dr. Sam Polisi, Dr. Edmund Fehoko, and Professor Jack Corbett, who wasn't able to be with us tonight. I had the pleasure of reading this. I'm not sure how many people have had a chance to have a look, but it is a really significant and important report. As Dr. Roani said in her introduction, it's really significant in it's the first time that there has been an effort to bring into our analysis and our debate the themes and issues that emerge from the practitioners of Pacific regionalism, which they refer to as regionalists. People who are committed to and believe in the regional project, people who've worked at the most senior levels of our regional institutions, but often people who are too busy to sit and reflect and document their reflections and learnings. Existing discussions have often focused on leaders or on media or on academic views, so this is a really important contribution. The report speaks not only to their lived experience, but also in the scholars' work they've then analysed the perspectives, and they've been able to open up through this report conversation on some of the big dilemmas that face regionalism and regionalists. So this is another really significant value of this report, this clear articulation of some of the paradoxes, or in the report they call them the dilemmas, that face the heads of these regional institutions. And I thought I'd just quickly touch on those three. You have heard them discussed in the panel discussion and the Secretary-General's keynote. The first one they identify is this paradox that regionalism itself represents both an empowered and a vulnerable region. That regional institutions themselves were created on this idea that Pacific states in some ways need them to overcome vulnerabilities. So being a regionalist is a position that at some level perpetuates that idea that the Pacific nation state needs something to be able to achieve its development. But it's also a position, as you've heard, that actively seeks to dismantle those narratives and speak to an empowered region. And the Secretary-General spoke of the narrative of the Blue Pacific continent. The second paradox they identify is the paradox that regionalism seeks both a goal of self-sufficiency but also of interdependence. So nations seek self-reliance but at the same time are increasingly reliant on each other. So this paradox speaks to the desire for autonomy and self-determination on one end, and then also on the ability to access those regional public goods that come from regional integration. And finally, the paradox which we heard a lot about today, the paradox presented by geopolitical choice, of the desire to be friends to all and enemies to none, to engage with both traditional partners as well as new and important economic partners who themselves may be competing with each other for primacy. So while the players may change, this dilemma is not a new one, but regionalists face a dilemma in that this geostrategic competition, as you've heard, can support the regional project, but it can also undermine it if external powers seek greater control or through bilateral initiatives that they may seek that could duplicate or damage regional efforts. But perhaps, and reflecting on the discussion we've heard today, the most significant value of this report is that it provides analysis and reflection on how these regional leaders have managed these tensions and these paradoxes, and where they have been at times pushed to the limits. These leaders do this every day as practitioners of regionalism, and there are significant learnings as to how they can best and worst manage these tensions. And this persistent tension which can drive greater regional solidarity on one side, but also increased fragmentation on the other. So these are the sort of questions the Transnational Leadership Project is seeking to unpack. And listening to our leaders tonight, and having sat in these roles myself, managing these tensions, I'm full of admiration for all of them. They've spoken a little bit about how they do manage these tensions. You heard from Cynthia and the SG a little bit about how they manage fragmentation and division, which can be caused by national self-interest through Talanoa. You heard from Sir Collin about ways to protect people's sovereignty if that's a concern. And Kosi and SG both touched on the ways they manage the opportunities that are inherent in geopolitical rivalry, trying to push it away from short-term transactional engagements and one-upmanship to something more in the long-term interests of the Pacific. So I think this is regional leadership, holding these tensions. As he said to me today, there's no easy answers, but the more we can share these learnings with tomorrow's leaders, the better. So in closing this launch of the report, I think we should acknowledge the scholars who have come together with the support of the Developmental Leadership Program and Australian Government, and who have chosen to study and engage on these important issues. It has been said, you know, often books on regionalism aren't there, whether it's biographies or even chapters within books on the Pacific. So these types of reports are incredibly important. So if we could join in just thanking them for pulling together this report, and of course acknowledging all the regionalists who are here today, those on the panel and many others, for the work they do in managing these very complicated paradoxes.
Thank you, Soli. And that brings us to the end of our time together. Just a few words of thanks, firstly, to Secretary General Puna. Thank you for coming and for those inspiring words. It is important that you share that, and I agree with Soli that we look forward to a bit more detail. So thank you very much for making the trip and for answering our invitation. Also to you, Kosi, thank you for making the trip to contribute this evening. We worked well together, I think, when in our time at you at SPREP and I was at SPC, we always pretty much supported each other. So thank you, and again, thank you for making the trip. I really do appreciate it, and the team appreciate it. Cynthia, what you guys have done is just impressive. I always thought that Ralph was the kind of MP or leader that I wanted to work with. He really pushed the boundaries, and clearly you folk have pushed that along. And like the Paris Agreement, nobody gave our leaders a chance, but they went to Paris and really made a big splash. Feels like that with the case to the criminal, to the International Court. So well done, and thank you for your time. Soli, thanks again for your support and for coming across from Canberra. To all of you here, we really appreciate your time and presence this evening. Is not particularly the best day to venture out, and so we really do appreciate your time, and those online, of course. As I said, Poutoko is an idea, a creation in formation, and we want to do some things that are relevant and useful. We want to invest and support young people into the process of knowledge collection, generation, and sharing. So expect us to do more of these things over time. This is our first foray of sorts into a public event of this type. I think it's important that the knowledge is shared not just between us and within us, but with our communities. It's an empowering I think. So we would be thinking about the future and what we might do by way of public engagement and discourse. To Rowanny and the team for putting on a great event, thank you. And to all of you who've helped out, Jude and Warwick, thank you for being here. We really appreciate all of you who've come along to be part of this event this evening. So that's really all from us. We invite you to join us in I told them that wine and cheese was so 1974. But anyway, it probably would be tofu and something. Look, thank you very much, everyone, and have a pleasant evening. Thank you.
Si